So welcome back. We're here again with another video from our World Brewers Reflection. Video number 10. Talked about score sheets. And it's important to understand before I start this is that these are my experience of what judges have been telling me or people I've been coaching throughout the years of competing or mainly throughout the two World Brewers competitions that I have done. This is not coming from someone that is a certified judge. I'm not a certified judge, so I can't really tell you much about that. But at least these are the kind of experiences that I've been having. So we're going to go through two score sheets today. We're going to look at the open service score sheet, and we're going to look at the head judge score sheet as well, because I think those are interesting. The compulsory score sheet, we all kind of know. I mean, it's a pretty basic, it's based on taste. You have acidity, body, and balances ×2, and that's very relevant, so focus on that. What I can say on the subject of the compulsory, which kind of reflects the open service and head judge as well, is that TDS is often discussed. I wouldn't worry too much about the TDS because the judges don't. They're not officially using it in the scoring, it's just reference. And that being said, TDS is so much based on how you take the samples, so how you actually do it, meaning that you can get different solids depending on how you get it. So when we're competing, just in general, we don't care so much about the TDS. That's going to look different depending on how you take the sample. We don't care much about TDS in general. So I would, at least personally, I'm disregarding it for this kind of discussion. No one is scoring lower because you have an indifferent TDS, unless that's like a gigantic, huge, massive difference. Otherwise, you should be fine. Open service score sheet in general, which is kind of interesting. So again, I mentioned it already, acidity, body, and balance is ×2. ×2 is important because that makes the score higher, right? So if you have a coffee that is amazing on acidity, body, and balance, I would say go for it. If it's a bit less in aroma or flavor, it doesn't really matter because that's not where the points are, right? So it's about understanding where you can get the most points. Acidity points are usually very high if you have an acidity that is very complex, perhaps changing in temperatures. But keep in mind, for example, that if you have a bad acidity or too intense or astringent or sour, then your acidity score as well as the balance score can go down, for example. And if your aftertaste is really crap, then most likely your body score will go down as well as balance. So some of these attributes are connected, and it's very important that you get the highest possible score on the ones that are connected. So I would say aftertaste, acidity, body, and balance are the most important things that you really, really need to focus on. Just the taste descriptors, I think this is a complicated one. I think a lot of us is continuously challenged with this. It's obviously, first of all, it's about delivering the taste notes in a way that people can understand it properly. That's very important. It's relatively simple as well. The judges have a score sheet going from aroma, flavor, aftertaste, acidity, body, balance, overall. So I would suggest that you go through describing the different attributes in that order. You have hot, warm, and cold. Do you need to describe all of them? No, you don't have to. Can you if you want to? Sure, you can. I described hot, aroma, all warm attributes, or basically from aroma to body, and then cold from flavor to body. Balance, I generalize more, and overall I just leave for the judges because that's basically the judges, right? But that's very important how you chose to show that. Some people use like these little cards where they write stuff down. Nothing wrong with that. Also, nothing necessarily good with that. From my experience, there's no feedback that tells me that you gain points or lose points because of it. It's just basically a stylistic choice. So feel free to do whatever you want there. And I mean, keep in mind that judges are different. Calibrations or no calibrations. There's always going to be a different idea about it, especially for natural to a world competition. There's very, very few national competitions where the judges' results are actually representative of what we can expect in the World Championship. So always recalibrate your national scores towards some kind of world judge. Otherwise, you just wouldn't know what you're up against. Taste description, again, needs to be delivered properly. Of course, it needs to be a taste description that the judges also find, this can be a tough one. because they do have a different background than you have, and taste might be different. We relied quite a lot on the SCA taste descriptors and how they work with their aroma kits to identify what we believe is notes that they can identify as well. Obviously, working with very flavor intense coffee helps that as well. But it can be really tricky. But key thing here, just focus on the main attributes in the coffee. If you find 6 flavors, maybe take it down to 4. You don't have to go all of them. Perhaps most importantly, the description needs to be what's up front, what's in the end, right? What's more intense, what's less intense. So if you say apples, or if you want to describe flavor, for example, and you say apple, melon, jasmine, that's a pretty unprecise taste description. What you want to do is that, okay, we have intense apple notes in front, followed by a mellow melon character and a jasmine coming after, and then an aftertaste or whatever that is, right? So you wanted to be a bit more thorough in describing it. Customer service, and this is kind of an interesting one, I think, because this is a bit of a mystery. Obviously, it's about explaining what you do well, explaining what you do in a way so the judges can relate to you and understand you. More importantly, explaining why is the cup of coffee tasting the way that it's tasting. That's really the focus here. That's what you want to do. Previously in Brazil, and I got that question sometimes after Boston as well now, whereas in Brazil I was grinding on stage, I was rinsing my paper filters on stage. And I'm bringing my own brewer. And the question here is, does any of those 3 things actually add to the value of the scoring? I can see on all my score sheets that the judges had noted down as a positive thing. The issue though is that when you ask them, there's nowhere on the score sheet to actually increase your points. So customer service in Brazil was actually lower because I was grinding my coffee, because they thought the time I was grinding my coffee I could have paid, focusing on them, where my argument was, well, it's a coffee shop experience and we always grind our coffee, but I was actually scored down lower. So personally, I probably don't see why I would ever grind on stage again or recommend anyone else to do it, because it's really not increasing the scores. Rinsing the filters on stage, same thing here. The judges don't really care. And I mean, in the end of the day, you can obviously do really tasty coffee by pre-grinding and pre-wetting, so why would you do it on stage? It's just more work that you don't have to do. Creating my own brewer, I think this has been debated. I think some people look at it as an innovative process, and they write on the score sheet, well, it's fun, it's a bit of innovation. However, the reality is that it doesn't reflect on the score. And that's mainly because the judges don't have anywhere to put it. So customer service is about how well you explain what you do and how smiley you are and comfortable, and how you make the judges feel. It's not about innovative and brew method. And if we look at the head judge score sheet, I'll just take it up on the screen in front of me. They're judging workflow and sensory uniformity, and workflow can be super high with any kind of brewer. It's just about how consistent you are with your brews, your pouring, how clean you are, and so on and so on, how much everything you do makes sense. They're not gonna score you higher because you grind on stage, right? Sensory uniformity is just about how the cups are tasting, nothing else, right? And here on the head judge, they were also writing down TDSs, but again, that's more for reference than anything else. My TDSs was pretty inconsistent in both ones, and that's not because the brews were inconsistent, that's because how they took samples this year was an interesting process, most random I've seen in a long time with this spoon thing. And the thing is that solids in a cup of coffee is not consistent throughout the cup. So the amount of solids you get is very much based on where you take them in the cup. So again, I wouldn't worry about TDS. Your coffees can taste very different, even if the TDS is the same, and your coffee can taste the same, even if your TDSs are very different. I think that's some of the kind of main characters that I brought with me from this. And it's important to understand the score sheet. I mean, read the rules as well. I know that very well, as in pour the right amount of coffee, and that's way better for you. But just keep this in mind and realize that there's a lot of scores you're missing here because your taste description is maybe not where you want it to be, or where your customer service is not where you want to be. A big part of the taste description score is actually going in your customer service score. So if your taste description is not proper, then you're actually going to fall down on points on your customer service, which is also pretty important to keep in mind. Another thing here in the last kind of reflection, if you look at the score sheet, you see that the coffee and brewing information section on the sheet is actually pretty small. And I think that's an indication of, how much info do they actually type down, and they type down pretty little. So I think the key thing here is to stop generalizing when you do presentations and start focusing a lot more on being specific in what you do. I think that's the main thing that I've been taking with me from judges now, is that you need to be specific. It needs to be about your cup of coffee. They don't want to hear about a farm. They want to hear about your coffee on the farm, right? So try to be as specific as you can in your presentations. With that, I think we're about done with the score sheet part. We have 2 more videos to go here, and then we're done. Thank you.